Welcome into the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We are diving into the receivers. We've talked a lot about them, but we got 2 weeks to go, and there's still some movement, still some order to be set as far as where these guys are going to go. So we're going to set the record on Drake London, Treylon Burks, the Ohio State guys, and tons more. Stay tuned here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Welcome on in, RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie, joined as always by Mario Puig. We are 2 weeks away from the first round of the NFL draft, so we're really in crunch time here. And of course, one of the bigger fantasy storylines for this draft, quarterback a little bit weak, running back, we're probably not going to see one go in the first round, tight end, kind of the same deal, but receiver, it's another loaded class. Again, we're getting totally spoiled by these ridiculous groups of receivers that seem to be coming out every single year, dating back to like 2018, it feels like. But we got a lot to get to, Mario. You just recently put up a article over on RotoWire.com. You can check it out. No paywall, I believe.
Correct.
And you're breaking down Drake London. You kind of measure him between two endpoints, the N'Keal Harry end of the spectrum and the Mike Evans end of the spectrum. Obviously, the Evans one, a lot more sunny of an outcome. Maybe London falls somewhere in the middle is kind of what some of your conclusions were, but I won't speak on them for you. So give us your kind of breakdown, your methodology, and what you were looking to find when breaking down Drake London in this context and what you did find.
Yeah, so I was talking about N'Keal Harry and Mike Evans, basically because they're all three big receivers of different sort, but they all fit into that bucket of just guys who are way bigger than almost all other receivers, almost all other receiver prospects. And there's even some athletic similarities between them. Like N'Keal Harry ran a 4.53 40 at the combine at 228, I think, and Evans ran a 4.53 at the same time at 231. So he's only 3 pounds heavier and yet ran the same 40 time as Harry's only 3 pounds lighter than Evans, ran the same 40 time, and yet you don't seem to see him threatening defenses at all. It's like he's going out there just kind of running into the corner, falling over, whereas Evans is very graceful with that athleticism. Like you see him play, and for split seconds when he's running routes, you can trick yourself almost into thinking that he's someone else. Like when you're watching him, you can almost think like that's some 6'2" guy when he's like running a slant, and then when he stands up fully again, like, oh no, that's Mike Evans. Whereas when you watch N'Keal Harry, he always looks more like there's this guy who played receiver for the Lions and the Cowboys a long time ago, Roy Williams, and
oh man,
he was like a freak athlete, in overall human terms, like functional football athleticism, apparently not so much, but he was one of those guys who was just freakishly fast and big, and he dominated at Texas, even had a little success in the NFL too early on. But when you watch him run, he looks more like N'Keal Harry, like very high, like I don't know what you'd call it, like the weight that he carries is like bound so high in his body, and it kind of keeps him like barrel chested and upright all the time. And I just kind of looked at those two and N'Keal Harry and Mike Evans, that is, and kind of wondered why things could turn out so differently, especially when it's, in Evans and Harry's case, it's like these guys have the same speed and mass basically to work with, and one is just completely useless in the NFL. So when I looked at London, when I looked at Harry relative to London, that was partially informed because you see a lot of concern on Twitter and I guess just general draft commentary that Drake London's too dependent on contested catches, and you hear comparisons on those grounds to guys like N'Keal Harry and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I didn't talk about Arcega-Whiteside in this one, but that's basically just because I thought he, by every measure, was a lesser prospect than N'Keal Harry. So I thought it'd be kind of redundant to go through this and say, like, and also, by the way, London is better. The point of the article is basically like London will be different than N'Keal Harry. He won't have the negative result in the NFL that Harry did. And I guess it would be redundant to go like, and also in each individual case, he's better than Arcega-Whiteside. Like, it's just kind of implied.
Sure.
But the concerns there are totally reasonable, because it is true that when you watch Drake London's tape, you see a lot of these plays where he's high pointing the ball, and there's another corner who's kind of going for the ball at the same time, and he makes those catches in college. Of course, he was all 3 years just dominating. But it's fair to look at a case like Harry and say, well, he dominated at Arizona State. He's even athletic. He's more athletic than London is, and yet it's just not showing up quite as much, I think, because of those like aesthetic differences. And it's not just that, but like in the production, like all the standards of production evaluation that would say N'Keal Harry is like a top prospect in the NFL. The same is true for London, and more in every case. Like it's possible that London fails in the NFL and isn't very good, but he's not actually the same as Harry in the first place. Like there's a certain set of things they have in common, but production-wise, they actually were never truly similar beyond being some version of very good. And I think when you watch the way those plays happen and compare them, these so-called contested catches in both of their parts, I think they look very different. Like in Harry's contested catches, you see a lot more just clobbering guys, like running into the guy at the catch point and just crushing this 190-pound Pac-12 corner.
Yes, you described him as a burly person on the field in your article. I enjoyed that.
Yes, it's like the first, I guess, word that pops into my mind when I'm watching Harry run. It's just like, looks like he's carrying some logs or something, and he's like
he's doing the barbarian.
It's like it's easy for him, but he's carrying these huge logs all the time and running with them, it looks like. Whereas with London, you see a lot of times where it's more like the Evans thing. You see him in his routes and you think, oh, that guy can't be very big. But then when the ball is in the air, all of a sudden he is.
Yeah, I went ahead and, part of prepping for this show, I went back and looked a little bit more at London's tape this morning. And I definitely saw the point you were making about where London can kind of at once be this, kind of technically refined route runner who can generate separation on his own, and then also be someone that can just physically dominate at this catch point and, shield his body from corners, all that good stuff. There's one play that really kind of like crystallized that, I thought, against Washington State. He makes this play where he kind of gets skinny between a couple of defenders, and then he makes the catch, and then he gets bigger and just bowls them over into the end zone. So like
was that the one where he was on the left side of the field and like it kind of looked like a slant, like inward route, and he like shifted, he like did a what is that, like a Euro step or something almost to the right and caught it. And yeah, that was a sick play. And you see that all the time. And I don't know if it has to do with his basketball background, but I guess that wouldn't be the most shocking thing. And it's quickly apparent when you watch London, he does stuff like that pretty regularly. That wasn't just like a one-off trick. And that's a rare thing to see in receivers generally, and especially ones as big as him.
Yeah, totally. So like that definitely stood out to me. And, after reading your article and going back, like that's something that you don't really see from too many prospects. And, I think you also made a good point about London's age and like his ability to hit the ground running at USC, despite playing alongside, future pros like Michael Pittman, like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And, he's kind of like doing double duty. Like he was going to play basketball at USC later in that semester, and for him to just still be able to get out there freshman year, loaded offense, loaded receiving core, much older guys, and still kind of more than just hold his own. He didn't have like the biggest target share, but on a per target basis he was great right away.
Yeah, and that's actually maybe the most notable difference between the production of London and Harry is that like Harry's production in his sophomore and junior years were way above the Arizona State baseline, with usage shares that conventionally correlate very reliably to NFL success. But his freshman year, he was below the Arizona State baseline. And this is at once forgivable, A, because he took up the leading target volume, and B, like there's other cases of true freshman receivers struggling to keep up with veterans that they're playing with. And like Rashad Bateman was one. He was below the Minnesota baseline his freshman year, but the volume was more reflective of what he would turn out to be in that case than the efficiency. So you forgive those inefficient freshmen usually. And Harry looked like he might have been one such case, especially after he did a good job at the combine. But London, for whatever else went wrong with Harry, like there's reason in that freshman year comparison to think that London is just something different than Harry. Maybe he fails still, but he's not quite the same thing that Harry was, because like you said, it wasn't just that he showed up as a true freshman, younger, by the way. And I know that seems probably like a really stupid thing to talk about to most people. Like London's 18 in 1 month and Harry's at 18 in 9 months or whatever. But when there's more than a half of a year difference between players, like normally that kind of opens the question of whether they're even in the same class at all. Like Harry might as well be thought of as almost like halfway to sophomore, rather than true freshman in the same sense that London was. And even with that, even without that age adjustment, which goes in London's favor, London's production was just conventionally stronger. And it wasn't just that he was playing against alongside NFL receivers, not just Michael Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but even Tyler Vaughns, who's been hanging around on practice squads. Vaughns is more than 4 years older than London. And Pittman is nearly 4 years older than London. Amon-Ra St. Brown is nearly 2 years older than London. So it is certainly possible that London is not a good NFL player, but I can't remember the last time a player was, conclusively more productive than multiple proven NFL talents like that. Better at production, by not just a little bit, like a lot. He's a much cleaner prospect than Pittman. And he's a similar type as Pittman too. So that's kind of a useful instruction, I think. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's like they're so different, can't really just assume London can do things that St. Brown can. They play basically different positions. But right. London can do everything Pittman can and more, and Pittman has already shown that he's some level of useful, even though he can't do everything London can do, or, at least I assume.
Right. So, I mean, if you take I think the Pittman baseline is an interesting detail because, he hasn't had great quarterback play through the first couple of years of his career, but he's a bigger guy, obviously played in the same offense as London way back when. Similar kind of aesthetic, but I still feel like London might be a little bit more ready to roll and has a little bit more like projectable growth to his game as opposed to Pittman.
Yeah, Pittman might be like faster actually, but I think it's more like I think it's one of those things that even though Pittman can outrun London in the 40, or I assume he can anyway, it's like London can run like all the applicable routes faster. Like he can't run the race as fast, but he can run the obstacle course faster.
I like that comparison. I just watched a video this morning of a bulldog running an obstacle course, and it really made my morning. Speaking of Pittman, did you know that he sort of has a St. Brown-esque family where he has a younger brother who's in college looks so much different, Micah Pittman. But he's a totally different type of receiver. So it is sort of like, the difference between Equanimeous St. Brown and St. Brown.
Also, I guess we were closing in on some kind of theory about dad's biceps.
Yes.
Because,
okay, there's something here.
The John Brown, that's his name, right? The St. Brown guy. Like he's like one of those steroid weightlifter guys, right?
Oh, I mean, like, if you look up a picture, he's like Mr. Universe, I think.
And the running back Pittman was always noted for having like unreasonably heavy curl muscles.
Yes,
like he was like listed at like 210, but there was about 80 pounds in his arms.
it looked like just like a giant russet potato was like shoved in there. It's just a giant bicep. But always enjoyed Michael Pittman.
If we find any wide receiver prospects and there's intel that their dads have massive biceps. I don't think shoulders will work. I don't think triceps either. It's got to be ideally those guys with those really grotesque like 6-foot biceps, from doing that one weird steroid. That's the next Megatron, the guy who's that guy's son.
Okay, so that's noted for the 2026 Devi class. Yes. All right. So we'll table that.
We're scouting dads now. Sorry.
I mean, that's how deep we get on this show, But anything else to add onto London after studying him, in more of a deep dive sort of way? Do you come away with him as your wide receiver one?
I'm actually not taking a position on that just because I can't really tell if I think any of them are better than the other for sure. And by any of them, I mean, My top three is almost certainly. I think I have a top three at this point, and I think it's
Okay.
London, Jameson Williams, and Chris Olave. That's not because I'm just trying to push aside Garrett Wilson and Treylon Burks. They're conventionally in that same thing, and outside of my own rankings, I would guess all five of those guys are kind of in that hunt right now. But London, I think, is justifiable as the first receiver taken. It just the question of whether you take him or a speedier player like Williams or Olave, I guess, just comes down to where you need the help. Like if you already have two fast guys at your outside spots and you need someone bigger to move the chains, maybe that team should take London, and maybe a team like the Chargers should take Jameson Williams or Chris Olave. Like they definitely don't need another London. And for whatever it's worth, I actually think Keenan Allen might be the comparison, but I think London might be a better version. Like London, I'm comparing him to Allen specifically in the sense that Allen has been a high efficiency, high volume producer, even though he doesn't threaten downfield. And the concern with London, if there is any, is speed, lack of speed. So he's got his pro day. I guess it's supposed to finally happen tomorrow, Friday, April 15th. And, maybe he tests pretty badly there. And by badly, I mean like 4.6 or something like that. But as long as he doesn't run like in the 4.65 or worse kind of range, I think I still like him as a top 15 pick. Like Keenan Allen, the 4.7 time you always hear is not true. He was running on a bad PCL at the time. So he's not like 4.7 pro day slow, Keenan Allen. But he might be 4.6 pro day slow. And if London is 4.6 pro day slow, then he does a lot of the same things as Allen. Like he's a bigger receiver, but he wins with short area separation because he's so good at understanding like defensive leverage and just route running in general. So I think that is my like median range comparison, which I guess that might be irresponsibly optimistic too. But I'll also say the Mike Evans comparisons that we might have had a little while ago, they don't really hold. Mike Evans is pretty close to like Megatron category, and it's pretty unrealistic to ever see players in that range. And so London's well short of that. But I do think he's kind of like the answer to the question of like, what if Mike Evans was a little slower and smaller, and in practice it's still a very good receiver.
No, exactly. So when you're talking about potential fits in teams, Team X has plenty of big bodies already, so London probably wouldn't appeal to them so much. We've heard, I think there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of thought that the first receiver off the board is likely, barring a trade, is likely going to be the Jets at 10. And we know about their interest in Tyreek Hill before he obviously got traded to Miami. So do we think that London is probably out of play for New York at 10? Do you think that they go with someone who's a smaller, shiftier guy like a Jameson Williams or a Garrett Wilson?
Yeah, I guess I'd be a little tiny bit surprised if the Jets took London, and it's not because I don't think it's worth it. I just, like you said, they already got Corey Davis, and I think Corey Davis is pretty good. So on the one hand, I do think I think I would probably call London a better prospect than Corey Davis was as a 5th overall pick, but that was a weird draft. London probably, and this would be terrible, obviously, probably should go like 11 to Washington, which would really suck. And I guess Michael Pittman already showed that you can survive to a certain extent with that idiot Carson Wentz as your quarterback, but still not where we want to be exactly.
No, certainly not. So we'll hope.
But yeah, Jameson Williams is getting more and more chatter to be the first receiver taken. I don't know what the quarterback market is exactly. Like where Malik Willis goes might hold some significant sway over where these receivers go, because if Pickett and Willis don't go in the first 6 picks, I don't know what other position is jumping that high. I mean, I guess there could be offensive tackle. There's some edge guys, of course, that are really good, but I don't think the teams picking there have much need for it. So I feel like there might be a surprise wide receiver pick in those first, especially the first 8. Like Atlanta, we really can't count out, even though they're not like heavily linked conventionally. Like they are really good bets, I think, to take a receiver just because. I don't know. Like that's everybody wants one. Like it seems like we're getting not just hype on these guys that we've been talking about, but players that we were talking about as like 4th and 5th round picks a month ago are getting more and more second and third round chatter. Like guys like Alec Pierce with Cincinnati looks like he's going to be in the first 2 rounds or top 75 picks anyway. Christian Watson might be going for the first round. So I don't know if guys like that are going as high as that, then I think that London, Olave, Jameson Williams, Wilson, they might all be going a little higher than we thought all along too.
So what should the Falcons do? Just using that as a jumping off point, because the joke's been made for several weeks now, but basically since the Ridley suspension, but and the Russell Gage trade, of course, too. But you look at that depth chart: Olamide Zaccheaus, Damiere Byrd, Kadarius Hodge, Auden Tate, Frank Darby, Chad Hansen. He might be the best one of this group.
Chad Hansen, yes, he is their alpha.
So I mean, it would make sense if they really believe in a receiver, but at the same time, like the Falcons need so many other things that
they do. They should probably trade back, but the way they picked Pitts was it was probably like the wrong pick, but it was still a good one for reasons outside their control. Like Pitts is just that good. Everything else they did was just almost as if they were trying to do everything completely wrong. Like I don't know how much worse they could have done than they did. So I have no faith in them converting additional draft capital into any sort of benefit. So I guess for a team as stupid as them, even though they're very bad and need a lot, I don't particularly recommend trading down. Like they almost need just like the talent in general and the range of the draft slot to bail them out from their own senses. But I think they could really use Stingley. I think Stingley, by the way, is clearly the best corner in the draft, and I don't understand why there's so much. I can't even find like a coherent reason why he should be slipping. People just kind of you get a. Well, he's falling because. What does this mean? What are you shaking your hands about?
You get bored. I think that after hearing about him being the best cornerback in college football from like his first snap back in 2019, you're just like there's going to be like the extreme, rush to anoint him and then the rush to tear him down once it's actually time for like his draft season. So
it's like a overbearing like traditional parents turning their kids into goths. It's like we've made people hear this Stingley hype so long they go, actually the 6'3", 200-pound guy in the AAC is better. It's got to be Sauce. That's the goth. That's becoming a goth in this analogy.
Oh, that's strong. I like that one a lot. Stingley is a total stud, and I think
so.
Gardner,
at 8, he would make sense at 8. They have Terrell, of course, but they only have Terrell. The one thing is they're never going to have leads, so who cares? No one's really. You got to worry about your run defense before, and worry about your ability to score points before you worry about your pass defense too much. But Stingley would be a better pick than I don't know most of their other inclinations probably.
Okay. All right. So that checks out. Another long season incoming for the Dirty Birds, just about 15 minutes from my current residence. But
I bet you can smell them there. I bet you can smell them from there, John, to be quite honest with you.
You really can. Cheap concessions, though. I'll give them that. Looking elsewhere, so we've talked about London a fair bit, of course. As you'll see on the ticker at the bottom of the screen, we got first wide receiver drafted odds. Garrett Wilson, leader in the clubhouse at plus 130. Drake London plus 175. Jameson Williams is the next at plus 500. Treylon Burks plus 1,200, and then Chris Olave at plus 1,800. Those are the main targets, as it were, because after that you get Jahan Dotson and Christian Watson at plus 8K. Respectively, those odds over at PointsBet. So if you were going to put down on first receiver taken, what would your lean be? And who's someone from that group that you would fade definitely?
Yeah, I guess it's going to sound funny after advocating for Drake London in that article and in this earlier part of the podcast, but I definitely would not bet on him for that one. I guess Garrett Wilson's the favorite for a reason, but I wouldn't bet that either. But the disclaimer there is I'm just lower in general on Wilson than most people, I guess. I think he's really good, but you see people trying to compare him to a Jamar Chase sort of effect, and that is ridiculous. You got to stop talking like this. But my favorite bets value-wise there, Jameson Williams is I guess my intersection of favoritism and bet return value, and just the value aspect. I would say Olave, but it seems like Jameson Williams is ahead of Olave at this point. So Jameson Williams is who I would pick there.
Yeah, I like the plus 500 for Jameson Williams. If things continue to trend well for him as they appear to be.
Burks, I'm fading too. London and Burks out of that sample, I think you can rule them out.
I forget how deeply we got into Burks and the cooling of his market in recent weeks, but can you make sense of it? He was such like a lock to. We see guys mess up their draft stock at the combine all the time, but it feels like you don't really see the consensus number one go to an afterthought after it the way that he did. And I didn't think he was horrible at the combine by any means.
No, he was safely above average at the combine. And the reason it sounded like there was so much criticism around him was just because the hopes were so high. Especially when you heard the reports about his mile per hour readings or whatever and his top speeds, there was reason to think that he might run in the high 4.3s or something. And it's I guess fair for someone to say like, well, you should just look at the field speed. Why would you even care about the testing speed at the combine? And I think you can care about both, which is why I'm not assuming Burks is slow or something. It's just that the 4.55, he ran that. Like, it's a real time that he ran at 225 pounds. And so we can just kind of know, even if it's not worth anything, at least we can know runs a 4.55 when he's 225 pounds. And so you can just get an idea of how a player's speed is contingent on, a certain build or a certain weight that they carry. And that's just helpful to know in general. And it's not like conclusive that he's not fast because he ran a not fast 40. That there is something lost in the track form and the football gait, I guess, is just totally different. But other guys did run faster than that and by a lot. And there were players who were similarly productive as him in college. And so like Chris Olave was my number one receiver going into the year by quite a bit. And he did nothing to lose his spot to me, really. Jameson Williams was unexpected emergence. Drake London was up there too with Olave. And Burks produced about as well as all of those guys, but some of them had a little bit better production. Like I would say London is in that group. And the other ones are definitely fast, and everybody's looking for speed all the time.
That's absolutely true. And but maybe Burks doesn't present that same top end speed. And you have such a loaded class, you got to draw the line somewhere. Any other guys? You mentioned some late, some recent hype guys out there as far as the receiver position is concerned. Watson out of North Dakota State being bandied about as a potential first round selection. How bad of an idea is that?
I don't know if it's a truly bad idea, but I wouldn't do it. I think Christian Watson does some things definitely well, but it's basically just being 6'4" and running a 4.38, and there's a certain inherent utility to that. Namely, you can stretch the field, and you can probably block pretty well against. If they try to put a fast corner on him, that fast corner is usually not in the similar weight range as Christian Watson, so you can get some good blocking matchups. And there's something to that. Like Christian Watson should be at least a 700 snap player in the NFL and be at least breaking even in terms of win replacement or whatever. But there are other players in this draft that you can say that about too. And those other players that we're comparing him to, especially if you're talking about guys like Burks and even Pickens, I would say it's like they have production that is much better to the point that it starts to indicate something about their skill sets as players. And so like the combine measurements are all about the tools that they have to work with, the athletic tools, but it doesn't tell them how much doesn't tell us how much they know or are able to do in terms of just football tasks. So the production is useful for kind of extracting that specific point. And what concerns me about Watson is as a fifth-year player, so he was a redshirt in all the seasons, he never became a dominant receiver in the North Dakota State offense. He was specifically just a downfield specialist kind of guy. And talking about the FCS level, 6'4", 208, running a 4.36. Like, yeah, you can really just run in a straight line, just run straight lines, post routes. And those guys aren't big and fast enough to deal with that every play.
Yeah, Montana's not going to have much to say about that.
Right. So, he did well in that capacity, but it just doesn't mean that much that he did. And it would have been helpful to see him do a lot more to kind of generate more, benefit of the doubt, I guess. But it's not just that he only caught those kinds of passes. It's that other receivers in his offense caught the kinds of passes that he didn't. So by that, I mean to specifically mention, this is not like a Georgia Tech, this is not like a Paul Johnson Georgia Tech offense where they're throwing the ball literally 15 times per game and there is just one receiver, Stephen Hill, running like post routes all the time. It wasn't quite like that. Like, they were run heavy, but there were other guys catching 10-yard slants and 12-yard routes, and Watson was not that guy ever. So maybe he never did that because they never gave him the shot, but that would be weird, wouldn't it? Like, wouldn't it be weird for a team to have the option of giving a 6'4", 208-pound receiver with 4.36 speed, by far the fastest player on the team probably? It would be weird to say, like, I don't want to get him running after the catch. I don't want to throw him slants. So it's possible they said that. It would just be very strange.
Right. And I think you can probably reason that North Dakota State knows what they're doing given their dominance at the FCS level. So, I think they've structured it right.
Yeah, I think he's Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and just to fine tune it a little bit, Marquez Valdes-Scantling has been hanging around while struggling to catch 50% of his targets in the NFL. I know he's a deep threat, but that's still not very good. I think what Christian Watson will basically be is the Marquez Valdes-Scantling who is close to good. Like, I think Valdes-Scantling is just kind of, he can block against small corners and he can run a fly in a post route. He'll catch 50% of his passes. Watson will be that, and he'll catch like 55, 56%, I think, which, like 850, 900-yard player at his peak, I would guess.
So, but, in that sense, we're projecting like a higher ADOT for him. So, like, there could be a little bit more like oomph per catch, though.
Sorry, higher ADOT in what sense?
Like, in the sense that, like, if he's going to be a 55%, catch rate guy, you would hope that.
Oh, high. You mean just higher in general? Sorry, I didn't know if you meant higher than Valdes-Scantling and that.
Oh, no.
Because Valdes-Scantling's was pretty far downfield because he just couldn't do anything in the first 15 yards. But Valdes-Scantling would even drop some of his wide open, far downfield plays. I think Watson will at least be a guy who doesn't screw up that play. Like, he doesn't have bad hands like Valdes-Scantling. Valdes-Scantling has some of the worst hands you'll ever see. And Watson, if he's just average in that capacity, will still be way better than him.
Okay. All right. So that definitely makes sense. Good.
But the first round talk is crazy. He should be going in like the late second or third, or like wherever Alec Pierce is going.
Okay. So before we get over to finishing out this point, got a quick message from our friends over at Blue Wire. So among those second round receivers, where theoretically Watson probably should end up, you talked about Alec Pierce. He's probably not, a top 40 guy, but, probably going within the first two rounds. Anyone else that you think could be like a little bit of a late riser? Do you think it's too late for that type of, and too much of the pro days and the combine have been decided to where that there isn't anyone else that we're going to like kind of invent as like a late sleeper, late riser?
Well, at this point, any changes are probably going to be due to teams reacting to their intel or what they think is intel. And, they got their grades or whatever, and now they're trying to guess what they think the market is so they can try to have an idea who's going to be available at what picks and stuff like that. And sometimes when those things move along, that's when you'll all of a sudden hear like 2 days before the draft, maybe it's even someone like as rock solid as Jake Glazer will just come out and say like, oh, teams are going to take this guy at the top, 30, and everyone else was talking about fourth round. Like, he could come out and say like Tyquan Thornton's going in the first round. Like, that kind of thing could happen. It wouldn't be that shocking depending on what kinds of things teams are trying to game out, But as far as that category where unexpectedly high, I guess, I think we anticipate players like Jahan Dotson and George Pickens enough that they're not really qualifying, but they should go high. Like those two could both go in the first round, even if those other guys go. Like there could be like 7 first-round receivers or something stupid like that. So it's hard. Everybody's like so high in the first place. It's going to be kind of hard for anyone to sneak up on us. But I guess to be fair, Watson could be one of them. I would say Khalil Shakir is a pretty compelling prospect, but it doesn't seem like he has as much hype as someone like Sky Moore, who I grade the same as Shakir, but Moore is a lot more in demand, it seems like. I'm a bit of a truther for Tyquan Thornton and Bo Melton, but Bo Melton from Rutgers, but I think they're both probably headed for like the 3rd round, going maybe around where Pierce does, something like that. And then I think after that group, you probably get a bit of a drop off, both in terms of like prospect quality and the demand. Like I guess you might expect someone like John Mechie to go after that, but I don't like him at all. I think I don't even know if I would draft him. So no. I think that's kind of the group. Like David Bell, I think he'll be fine, but he didn't test well enough to go high anymore. So he's not going to sneak up on us. It's got to be, I guess, like Thornton. Some people will think Pierce was a surprise, but Pierce to the top 75 seems like a pretty solid bet.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I think we're looking at guys with those standout, kind of ridiculous, rare traits like Tyquan Thornton's speed, could be something that gets teams, over their skis a little bit.
Yeah, I guess it wouldn't be shocking either if Calvin Austin went surprisingly high. I wouldn't do it. I think the team that does it will.
You're just turning in your least Miles Boykin for a least Kevin Austin. Like that's pretty.
Sorry, I meant Calvin Austin,
the
Memphis one. Yeah, so like I can see some stupid, to be clear, team thinking like, oh, we're gonna get him because he's the next Tyreek Hill. Like I think he's more like
Jakeem Grant.
Yeah, like there's this thing going around about how the closest objective combine athlete to Tyreek Hill is Calvin Austin, and that's just nonsense because like Calvin Austin is an inch shorter and 15 pounds lighter. Like who's 15 pounds lighter than another player and in the same category as that? Like you gotta be talking like heights of 6'10" before that kind of pound difference doesn't matter. And when you're talking 5'7", it sure as hell does. So yes. I don't think I think Sean McVay will take Calvin Austin way higher than anyone thinks because he took Tutu out well, and they're similarly stupid premises.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Sorry, Austin's fine. He's a way better prospect than Tutu, but neither belongs in the first 4 rounds.
No, sir. One last receiver that I want to touch on, and then I want to finish out with your latest speculations on what the Jags may or may not do with the first pick. But, Justin Ross is someone who I think has kind of fallen off a lot of the radars and understandably, the combine, that the lack of production his last season, even though we've kind of established that he was still, the best receiver on Clemson, he was much better than the baseline of that team. The baseline very low, of course, but I think we're starting to see where the fault of that was, and it certainly wasn't Justin Ross, but the injury concerns, the lack of stamped legit time workout metrics. It just feels like, what do you do with Ross at this point? Like, is he someone that you would even take a flyer on in first year player drafts? Like, what do you do with him at this stage?
He's definitely worth a flyer, but I would put him safely behind. I'm only grouping them together because they're both guys who had really high valuations in the recent past and have fallen in the past couple months. But David Bell, I would keep David Bell ahead of Justin Ross, even though Bell has some similar concerns, because Bell doesn't have the medical red flags that Ross might have in addition to everything else. And he might have a red flag over his spine. And more recently, he might have a red flag over his foot, I guess. And sorry, I don't even know if I should be mentioning that because I haven't followed it up closely enough to know for certain. But it sounds like he might have had some kind of foot thing at his pro day. So I guess we should have. I guess I should have followed up on this after mentioning how he had the bad pro day, because it is possible that it's kind of like a Keenan Allen thing. Except if Ross is running on a bad wheel, the significance there is he is actually fast when healthy. Like Keenan Allen is not fast when healthy, but he's not 4.7 slow. It's possible that Ross is not 4.64 slow. It's possible he's more like a 4.48 or something when he's healthy. But man, if you gotta take that leap of faith and you have to get over whatever concerns you might find looking into the spine issue, I guess I'd be surprised if he went before like I don't know, like the first few picks of the 4th round.
Yeah, I think that's probably a safer projection for him at this stage. And the foot thing, like he played through some foot issues this past season. I think he might have like even had dealt with a little bit of hamstring too. So I mean, it's been a while since we've seen fully fledged, fully healthy Justin Ross. Like I'm talking 2019.
Yeah, and I don't know how this is possible. Like I don't know how a player could be the 4.64 running player and then the true freshman player that Ross was. Like it just doesn't seem possible. So I don't know if I'm kind of inclined to believe the thing about his foot slowing him down, because I guess I'll be in denial about it. I don't know how it's possible to do what he did. Like if he really is just Tim Patrick, how the hell is Tim Patrick as a true freshman keeping stride with T. Higgins, who's a year older than him? The simulation just doesn't run, it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's something amiss. I don't know.
So, yeah, I would love to see a simulation in which Justin Ross can be fully healthy, because I mean, like, after his true freshman season, like there was him and there was the rest of the guys as far as, what those 2018 freshmen looked like. Obviously was unable to play in 2020, a little bit hampered this past season, but yeah, his best is as good or better than anyone's in this class. We just don't know if he'll ever get back to it.
Yeah. And I mean, it is possible that he just wasn't ever as good as his true freshman year would lead us to believe. But the thing is, even if that's true, he could be, quite a bit worse than we thought he would be, and he'd still be grading better right now than he is. So there is a lot of smoke around him, but it is pretty jarring how far he's fallen, how far his valuation has fallen. And I think it's fair to say, like, even if every one of those red flags is right on the mark, the fact that he was ever as highly valued as he was is grounds for, at least in whatever, the 3rd round or something of your rookie drafts. And I wouldn't bother with him in redraft or best ball or anything, but in Dynasty, it's like you're probably picking somebody who's not going to do anything anyway. So you might as well take the one who we thought might have been whatever the next great 6'4" fast guy would have been.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that makes sense. Good to know as far as, getting your best ball portfolios ready. Probably not someone that you need to get heavy late round exposure to. Let's round things out. Let's talk a little bit more about the Jags. We don't have to go too far into it, but obviously they've made moves this offseason that kind of complicate or at least put it up for debate when it comes to how they're going to go about this first overall selection. And there isn't a quarterback that is really worth taking at 1-1. So like there aren't going to be a ton of suitors to go ahead and trade up. So obviously Trayvon Walker has really skyrocketed up. He's the second highest odds of anyone for being the first overall pick at plus 350. Aiden Hutchinson still hanging on as the favorite at minus 250, and Ike Ekwonu out of NC State and Evan Neal, both plus 1,200 and plus 1,400 respectively. I know that they're bringing back Cam Robinson, but I also know that they've also, kind of added to their edge personnel. So when you look at the potential candidates, which makes the most sense for the Jaguars?
I mean, honestly, I would say Stingley would make a lot of sense for them, but it doesn't seem like anyone's considering him. So, and then even after Stingley, I would almost say like you guys should take one of the receivers, but that's not a consideration apparently. So with that restricted list of options, I guess, yeah, one of the defensive ends, because they can't take a tackle at that 3rd pick. Like they're paying Cam Robinson, and they got 2 second-round picks competing at right tackle. So, like, where is Evan Neal going to play if they draft him? And the answer would seem to be the bench unless they like I don't know if you can sign a guy after he signs the franchise tag. I feel like it's the tender is more tradable before signing. I don't remember, but Robinson signed it, so it's like I don't know. I don't even know why they kept him, but since they did, I don't see how Neal or any of the other tackles is actually an option. So it's just the edge defenders that's an option at that point. And yeah, I guess if you're restricting yourself to that category, Hutchinson makes sense. I think he doesn't make any more sense, though, than Walker or Thibodeau, really. But it seems like Thibodeau, for kind of like personality reasons, is kind of being regarded as lesser than Walker and Hutchinson. So they both have projection issues. I mean, like with Hutchinson, you got the really good production in college, but he did not compete for production on a defense with as many other good players as Walker, and B, his defense wasn't as good as Walker's Georgia defense. C, he's not as conventionally strong as an athlete as Walker is. And I know people, the general narrative you hear around Hutchinson is like, oh my God, he's another JJ Watt. Did you see his 3-cone? Oh my God, he's a something Sigma athlete. And he is very athletic. Like he's a very athletic person for sure. But we don't have any case studies of a 6'7", 260-pound defensive end thriving or doing anything in particular really in the NFL. Now, the odds are that Hutchinson will be the first of that category and incidentally will be a good version, a good case study of that type, but we don't know. And in the meantime, and Walker, his production was not great, but it wasn't terrible either. And he's competing for stats with like 6 other first-round picks. I'm not saying that he's a slam dunk. I'm saying there's a degree of projection between Walker that's not that much more than with Hutchinson. And yet the narrative is that Hutchinson cannot fail and that Walker is like, some half-court shot. And I don't see it that way.
Right. I think a lot of people, especially after Walker kind of officially entered the discussion after the combine with what he did, checking in at 6'5", 272, running the 4.5, having the elite cone drill and the jumps, just pretty much off the chart. Truly one of the best workouts in recent memory. But then I think that there's been sort of like a plexiglass effect where things have pushed back and people mention, when they look at the film a little bit more and they look at the production and they don't see as many tools in the toolbox as far as like him getting to that elite athleticism. They don't really see the refined pass rush skills when it comes to Walker.
Yeah. And I would believe those. Like I am pretty high on him, even though I concede at the start, he doesn't have pass rush moves or things like that, but he is such a rare class of athlete that I think we have to keep in mind is that if he makes any improvement, the windfall from that will be greater than when almost any other player makes the same level of skill improvement. Like those tools are so loud that he just needs to, if he's an F in pass rush technique as a letter grade, then if he gets to D, that could be a double-digit sack player right there. If he gets to C, he could be a 15 sack player. Like he's got tools that are only comparable to players like Odafe Owe and Ezekiel Ansah, Cam Jordan. People don't remember
Montez
Cam Jordan.
Sweat.
Well, Sweat's more funny enough. Sweat's built more like Hutchinson. Like he's kind of like tall and skinny. But there's like these class of guys who are like burly, but also running those freak numbers. Like Walker's built like a 1990s like strong side defensive end, but he's faster than pretty much all the receivers from that area. It's like he's so freakish. And the other thing I guess I want to say about Walker quickly is he wasn't invisible on that defense or something. Like he had like the second most tackles for loss, second most sacks. He was always like really close to the team leader. He just wasn't dominating like Myles Garrett did. And he'll never be that. He's not close to that caliber of prospect. But Ezekiel Ansah didn't produce at all at BYU either. He had like half as many sacks as Kyle Van Noy, and only played like a year and a half. I know he got to football late, but the thing is, like, he came into the league with lesser tools than what Walker has coming in. He came out more raw than Walker was at an older age than Walker is, and those tools were so loud that he still became like a 1 sack per game player before his health gave out, basically, his durability, I should say, gave out. So I think there is like a worst case scenario where Walker is a disappointing player and a bust. But I think his worst case scenario, the absolute worst, is like Emmanuel Ogbah, who is like an average starter. I guess Cleland Farrell is like another nightmare thing that people raise, and like he had better production in college. And he wasn't a bad athlete exactly either, but the category of player that Walker has not really failed. Like he might not be a finished product. He might not be good exactly right now. Like Rashaan Gary's another one. Like people said that guy was straight up bad at Michigan, and he came into the NFL with crazy tools, and the Packers said, "We'll try to turn you into something." And now he's probably still not that sharp technique and skill wise, but he's becoming an above average starter anyway because the game is easier when you're that big and fast.
Right. 100%. Yeah. So that Gary one is interesting because the narrative was so similar. He was,
people hated that guy. They were like, this guy sucks.
He's never sacked a quarterback in his life.
Doesn't love the game. Yeah. So anyway, I think Walker, Cam Jordan's the other thing too. Like Cam Jordan didn't put up sack numbers at California. People thought he was just like people thought he was riding the coattails of Tyson Alualu, and then he gets to the NFL and it's like, oh yeah, I guess when a guy's like 280 pounds and he's faster than our safeties, maybe we should just assume we can do something with that.
Fair assumption, indeed. Putting you on the spot here, any of these other like potential top 10 guys, save for the quarterbacks, because that's kind of a different discussion where positional value is kind of like pushing them up the board. But any of these other guys that are getting talked about as locks to go in the top 10 that maybe you're not as enthused about?
Not really. I mean, I don't know enough about what's likely to happen to say like what is wrong there with the assumption. Like I wouldn't take Sauce Gardner in the top 10 ahead of Derek Stingley if I was these teams, but I can't really say it won't happen because I have no idea, but like that one's a weird one to me. I don't get it at all. Wish him the best, but I don't get it. I guess guys like Evan Neal seem like a lock to go top 5 to me. So like, even more than Willis. Like I projected Willis to go to the Lions at 2, but I say Neal in the top 5 is more likely than Willis in the top 5. So like him, I don't think is negotiable. I guess Ekwonu's probably not going much later than that either. I guess if we're talking guys who might crash the top 10 that aren't projected for it, I don't know anything about offensive line technique or whatever, but Trevor Penning, he's pretty huge and really, really athletic at tackle, and some teams really like guys like that. So I guess if there's someone who's going to crash the top 10 that isn't getting talked about that much, I think Penning might be someone who could do that.
Okay. All right. So keep an eye there.
Maybe Desmond Ritter. Yeah, I'll say first Penning and second Ritter. I think I don't know if these are still up, but it was over under 2.5 quarterbacks in the first round, and I would definitely take over. I think it's more likely that like Desmond Ritter goes before Pickett than it is that only 2 quarterbacks go in the first round. So maybe the bet fails because Pickett falls to the second and Ritter goes ahead of him, but I think that's more likely than Ritter not going in the first at all.
Well, then of course we know that Sam Howell is totally going in the first round too, right?
I guess.
I'm joking, listeners.
I don't know if we should joke. I mean, who knows? I am inclined to think he's more of a Will Grier category of prospect, but it only takes one team. I mean, there have been first round picks that all other 30, 31 teams said was stupid. That one team made it anyway. So can't count him out, I guess. Would it really shock you if like Pete Carroll traded if the Seahawks were dumb enough to give Pete Carroll like another mortgage to the future and he like traded back into the first to get Howell after taking Sauce Gardner at 10? Would that shock you?
No. Gosh, no. Yeah, but we've been kicking around the Seahawks a lot this offseason, but kind of deserved. So
until they stop, we'll keep doing that.
Yeah, the punishment will continue until. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll be back again next Wednesday, so back to our kind of regularly scheduled off-season time, and then we'll just be 8 days away from the NFL draft. So looking forward to that. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast.
Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.